Welcome to Occult Mysticism, your path to practical wisdom. Today, we explore Foundations of Practical Magic by Israel Regardie, a guide to applying magical principles in daily life. Join us as we uncover these transformative techniques. Subscribe for more esoteric insights. Among the vast constellation of luminaries who have sought to preserve and transmit the sacred sciences of the soul, there are those whose work serves not only to illuminate the past, but to define the very course of the future. Such a one is the brilliant scholar and practitioner Israel Regardie. In his monumental collection of essays, aptly titled Foundations of Practical Magic, we are presented with one of the most significant and lucid expositions of the Western esoteric tradition ever offered to the sincere student of the mysteries. Mr. Regardie, possessing a rare and formidable intellect disciplined by both the rigorous technical systems of the Hermetic arts and the penetrating insights of modern psychoanalysis, undertook a task of profound historical necessity. He sought to rescue the royal art of theurgy from the twin perils that beset it. On the one hand, the decay into superstitious necromancy and ignorant grimoire-mongering, and on the other, the sterile, materialistic dismissal of the modern world which sought to reduce all spiritual phenomena to mere suggestion or pathology. With the precision of a scientist and the reverence of a true initiate, Israel Regardie restored magic to its rightful and dignified throne, presenting it not as a means of coercing nature for selfish gain, but as a complete and sophisticated spiritual technology, a divine science of the soul. He reveals magic to be a definitive, psychological, and methodical process for human regeneration. Its singular, noble, and ultimate purpose is the purification of the human personality, the methodical balancing of its constituent faculties, and the systematic, conscious invocation of that higher, immortal, and luminous genius, the holy guardian angel, the divine inner self, which is the true and eternal birthright of every human being. In this work, Regardie provides not just the philosophy, but the very tools themselves, uniting the grand cosmology of the Qabalah with the internal discipline of meditation, culminating in a practical, repeatable technique for the systematic cultivation of spiritual power. To study these foundations is to be handed the architectural blueprints and the working trestle board for the building of the true temple, that house not made with hands, which is the perfected and glorified human soul, dwelling consciously in the light of its own divinity. Mr. Regardie commences his great undertaking with a foundational discourse upon the art and meaning of magic, an essay of superlative clarity, which itself must be understood as the cornerstone of his entire philosophical edifice. He initiates this exploration by establishing the profound, underlying unity of the highest magical conceptions found in both the Eastern and Western traditions. With the discerning eye of a comparative scholar, he examines the deeply flawed and materialistic analyses of early Western observers of Eastern mysticism, using as his primary example Major Waddell's study of Tibetan Lamism. He demonstrates with penetrating logic how an uninitiated observer, lacking the spiritual and psychological keys to the tradition, must inevitably misinterpret its sacred rites. When Waddell reports that the lamas assume divine forms merely to frighten away lesser demons or cultivate a deep vocal tone only to feign an air of mature wisdom, he is reporting only the outermost decayed husk of the rite, completely missing the profound psycho-magical technique within. Mr. Regardie counters these puerile interpretations by revealing the true theurgic principle at work. He affirms that the highest practices of both the Lama and the Western magician spring from an identical understanding, though their symbolic language may differ. The true and singular aim of all high magic is the systematic preparation and purification of the human personality, transforming it from a vessel of clay into a chalice of gold, fit to receive the descent of the divine light. Magic, he insists with unwavering conviction, is the supreme mode of spiritual culture. It is a series of sophisticated, time-tested techniques designed to cleanse the psyche of its pathogenic strains, its unconscious complexes, its inherited fears, and its crystallized limitations, so that the higher self, the true and radiant genius of the individual, may be consciously invoked and brought into full waking manifestation. This is the central thesis of the entire work. Every ritual, every vibration of a divine name, every complex visualization is a precise psychological tool for the repairing, strengthening, and ultimate elevation of human consciousness, preparing it to safely contain and manifest the incandescent splendor of its own divine source. Having established this grand purpose, Mr. Regardie proceeds to illuminate the specific mechanisms of the magical art, defending them with the clarity of a psychologist. He addresses first the cornerstone of all ceremonial work, the astral assumption of god forms. This, he explains, is not an act of idolatry or primitive superstition. The god forms, particularly those perfected and conventionalized by the ancient Egyptians, are profound psychological glyphs, archetypal images representing the great cosmic forces and intelligent architects of the universe, the very faculties of the divine mind. The magician, by an act of trained and sanctified imagination, builds this divine form around his own astral body, vibrates its corresponding names of power, and seeks a conscious identification with it. This act is a technical marvel of spiritual engineering. It creates a resonant focus, a consecrated mold within the psyche of the operator, into which the specific macrocosmic force, the consciousness of the god itself, may descend and incarnate. It is the primary method by which the magician unites his individual consciousness with the vast archetypal consciousness of the gods, ascending, step by step, the hierarchical ladder of being toward the ultimate and ineffable root of all. In the same manner, he clarifies the true nature of sound in magical practice. The sonorous incantations and the so-called barbarous names of evocation the profane mind dismisses as meaningless gibberish are anything but. Their power lies not in their semantic definition, but in their vibrational frequency. The skilled practitioner, by vibrating these ancient names, awakens by sympathetic resonance the subtle centers and dormant spiritual faculties within his own soul that correspond to the frequency of that name. The voice, properly trained and directed, becomes a potent instrument for awakening the hidden forces of the microcosm. One of the most revealing analyses in this opening section is the profound parallel Mr. Regardie draws between a devotional exercise of the Tibetan lamas and the foundational Western rite known as the Qabalistic cross. The Lamaistic rite, as recorded exegetically by Waddell, involves the touching of the forehead, chest, and epigastrium while intoning sacred syllables. This, Regardie shows, is the Eastern cousin to the far more explicit and powerful formula of the Western Qabalah. In this rite, the practitioner first touches the forehead, visualizing a sphere of brilliant light, and vibrates the Hebrew word "ata," meaning "thou art." He then draws this light down to the breast or heart, vibrating Malchus, meaning "the kingdom." He touches the right shoulder, visualizing a sphere of red light, vibrating Ve Gevura, meaning "and the power." He touches the left shoulder, visualizing a sphere of blue light, vibrating Ve Gedula, meaning "and the glory." Finally, clasping his hands upon his breast over the point of intersection, he affirms Le'olam, Amen, meaning forever, Amen. Mr. Regardie reveals that this is no mere imitation of a Christian gesture, but a fundamental operation of magic. The operator, by this act, consciously establishes the primary axes of his own being. He affirms the descent of the vertical shaft of divine light from the spirit, Kether, above into his material vehicle, Malkuth, below. He then affirms the establishment of the horizontal shaft, consciously balancing within himself the cosmic pairs of opposites, power and mercy, severity and loving kindness. By this simple ritual, the magician defines his own center as point of perfect equilibrium for all cosmic forces and places his entire being under the direct aegis of his highest divine self. With equal force, Mr. Regardie defends the mechanisms of talismanic magic and the Eucharist, striking directly at the modern, materialistic argument that their effects are based entirely upon suggestion. While acknowledging suggestion as a potent factor, he insists that it is incomplete. He champions the ancient doctrine of a tangible, transmissible, vital fluid, the animal magnetism of Mesmer, the prana of the yogis. This vital force, he argues, can be transmitted from a healthy operator by an act of will, a fact easily verifiable by simple experiment. A talisman, therefore, is not a mere psychological charm. It is a material base, chosen for its sympathetic affinity to a specific spiritual force, such as gold for the sun or silver for the moon, which is then, through high ceremony, cleansed of all alien influences and deliberately charged with this vital energy. The consecration transforms the inert substance into a living organism, a battery, a true and potent vehicle for the invoked divine force. The Eucharist operates on the same principle, but its aim is internal transmutation. By consecrating a substance, such as bread and wine, the magician charges it with the very essence of the invoked Godhead. The subsequent consumption of these elements is a magical act of alchemy, assuming that divine and transmuting force directly into the cells and fibers of his own body, systematically purifying his mortal frame and replacing its earthly elements with the substance of spirit, thus building the true temple of the Holy Ghost. The philosophical zenith of this opening treatise is achieved in Mr. Regardie's masterful comparison of the Tibetan Cud ritual with the quintessential Western ceremony known as the bornless ritual. In this contrast, he lays bare the fundamental, defining difference in psychological and spiritual aim between the two great traditions. The Cud rite, he explains, is rooted in the Mahayana Buddhist doctrine of anatta, or no self. It is a ritual of supreme spiritual sacrifice. The practitioner, seeking a haunted and desolate locality, identifies with a wrathful goddess and deliberately invokes the hosts of demons and malignant spirits, which he recognizes as the personifications of his own vices and the constituents of his illusory ego. He then visualizes his own body being dismembered and offers his flesh and blood as a feast to these entities, thereby achieving the rite's goal, the complete annihilation of the ego idea and the realization of the universal void. This is an intentional and profound act of dissociation. The Western tradition, as exemplified in the bornless ritual of the Golden Dawn, takes a diametrically opposite, though no less profound, approach. The Western magician seeks not the annihilation of the ego, but its purification, integration, balance, and ultimate exaltation into identity with the divine. The magus first assumes the idealized god form of Osiris, the perfected soul, the self that has triumphed over death and trial. He, too, invokes the elemental forces of the cosmos, but he does not sacrifice himself to them. He commands them as their master, using their power to cleanse his own vehicle. He invokes the silps of air to sweep his mind clean of pride and frivolity. He calls the salamanders of fire to burn away the dross of hatred, irritability, and ferocity. He summons the undines of water to wash his emotional nature clean of lust and idleness. And he commands the gnomes of earth to purge him of avarice, grossness, and spiritual sloth. The goal is not dissociation, but a perfect and hierarchical integrity. Having thus balanced the elemental bases of his own soul, the magician performs the Eucharist, blessing not only himself, but the very elemental beings he has summoned, elevating all of creation with him. He concludes not by dissolving into a void, but by affirming his identity with the triumphant, risen God, the bornless Spirit, the reconciler of heaven and earth. Through this brilliant analysis, Mr. Regardie establishes the Western system as a complete, powerful, and psychologically sophisticated path, perfectly suited to the Western mind, a path not of annihilation, but of conscious, integrated, and perfected Christhood. Having thus defined the profound philosophy and purpose of the art, Mr. Regardie then dedicates a substantial and luminous portion of his work to providing the essential map of this spiritual cosmos, a Qabalistic primer. He brilliantly reframes the Qabbalah, moving it beyond its historical confines as a purely Jewish mysticism and presenting it as a universal and indispensable tool, a magnificent filing cabinet for the human mind. The genius of the Qabbalah, he demonstrates, lies in its central glyph, the Tree of Life. This diagram is revealed as a divine architecture, a complete schematic of both the macrocosm, the unfolding of the universe from God, and the microcosm, the psychological and spiritual structure of man himself. The tree, he explains, is comprised of 10 primary emanations, or spheres, called the Sephiroth, which are connected by 22 paths, the whole comprising the 32 paths of wisdom. He first illuminates the grand structure of this glyph, the 3 great pillars upon which all reality is constructed. On the right stands the pillar of mercy, representing all that is positive, masculine, expansive, and constructive force. On the left stands the pillar of severity, representing all that is negative, feminine, receptive, and form-giving. Between these 2 great columns of cosmic opposites stands the middle pillar of equilibrium, which is the path of consciousness itself, the royal road of reconciliation and return to the Godhead. This is the central spiritual lesson of the Qabbalah, that the divine path is not found in the pursuit of either extreme, but in the perfect balance between them. He further expands this cosmology by describing the 4 worlds, the descending planes of reality. These are Hatzaluth, the archetypal world of pure divine essence; Braya, the creative world, the realm of the great archangels who first received the divine impulse; Yetzirah, the formative world, the domain of the angelic choirs who fashion the subtle astral prototypes of all forms, and finally Asha, the world of action, which is our physical, material universe. These four worlds, he reveals, correspond directly to the four letters of the ineffable divine name, the Tetragrammaton, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, representing the Divine Father, the Supernal Mother, the Divine Son, and the emergent daughter or bride. This structure demonstrates that from the highest spark of divinity to the densest particle of matter, all is one interconnected chain of being. All is the manifestation of the one God. This revelation culminates in the profound doctrine of the Pentagrammaton, the five-lettered name Yod-Hah-Shin-Bohah. This represents the miraculous insertion of the Hebrew letter Shin, the symbol of divine fire and the Holy Spirit, into the center of the four-lettered name of natural, elemental man. This glyph, YHVH, is the magical formula of the God-man, the perfected adept, the natural human being who, through theurgic discipline, has consciously invoked the divine fire and achieved enlightenment. It is the formula of the Master. With this framework established, Mr. Regardie then provides a luminous and systematic journey, sphere by sphere, through the 10 Sephiroth of the tree, revealing the intricate network of symbols, mythologies, and meanings contained within this divine filing system. He begins, as all creation does, with Kether, the crown, the first and highest Sephira. This is the primal will, the first concentration of the infinite light of the Ein Sof into a single, smooth point of potentiality. It is the macroprosopis, the great face, the seed of all seeds, and the ultimate root of the soul. What the Egyptians knew as Amon, the concealed one, and Ptah, the divine potter who forms all things. It corresponds to the Kayath HaKadesh, the holy living creatures of Ezekiel's vision, and thus to the supreme mystical experience of the Merkaba, the divine chariot upon which the soul ascends to its source. From this indivisible unity emerges the primary duality. Second is Shukma, or wisdom, the great supernal Father, the dynamic, masculine, positive outpouring of pure energy. Attributed to the divine name Yah and the archangel Ratziel, this is the sphere of the entire wheel of the zodiac, the limitless motive force that vitalizes all of creation, the divine utterance of Thoth who stands between the light and the darkness. Balancing this infinite force is the third Sephira, Binah, or understanding. She is the great supernal mother, the feminine, receptive, form-giving potency of the cosmos. Attributed to the planet Saturn, she is stability, form, and the limitless dark sea of substance from which all life is born. Mr. Regardie brilliantly explores her primary symbolism as the Shekinah, the indwelling presence of God. He contrasts the Orthodox Jewish concept of the Shekinah as merely God's presence with the profound Qabalistic doctrine that she is a quasi-independent feminine element within the Godhead, the very matrix and origin of all human souls, thus linking the Qabalah directly to all great mother goddesses like Isis, Shakti, and Mary. Kether, Chakma, and Binah together form the transcendent supernal triad, existing beyond the grasp of the normal mind, separated from the lower 7 Sephiroth by the vast conceptual gulf known as the Abyss, which can be crossed only by the adept who has undergone the mystical death of the personal ego. Below this divine triad, the creative forces manifest in the ethical and psychological universe we can begin to comprehend. The fourth Sephira is Chest, meaning mercy or majesty. Attributed to the planet Jupiter, this is the sphere of the benevolent and crowned king. It represents order, law, authority, generosity, abundance, and the establishment of form through love and attraction. It is the organizing principle of creation, the divine Dharma. This compassionate force is held in perfect necessary tension by its opposite, the fifth Sephira, Geburah or severity, attributed to the planet Mars and the divine name Elohim Jibor, Almighty God. This is the sphere of pure power, righteous wrath, dynamic energy, and sacred destruction. Geburah is the divine warrior, the corrective force that wields the sword and the scourge, breaking down the crystallized, outmoded forms built by Chesed, ensuring that life does not stagnate but remains a vital, evolving process. It is the purifying fire of divine justice. These two profound opposites, the builder and the destroyer, mercy and severity, are brought into perfect reconciliation and sublime equilibrium in the sixth and central Sephira, Tifereth, which means beauty. Positioned in the very heart of the tree of life, Tifereth is the sphere of the sun. It is the central balancing point of the entire Kabbalistic system, the nexus connecting the divine above with the human world below. This is, supremely, the sphere of the sacrificed and resurrected gods found in every great world. Religion, the Egyptian Osiris, the Greek Dionysos and Apollo, and the Christian Christ. It represents the divine child, born of the union of all cosmic forces. For the individual, Tifereth is the sphere of the higher consciousness, the true self, the holy guardian angel. It is the triumphant Osiris, the perfected soul glorified through suffering, who becomes the conscious reconciler of all spiritual and material forces within his own being. From this radiant center of the self, the forces of the personality further differentiate. The seventh Sephira is Netzach, or victory, attributed to the planet Venus. This is the sphere of divine emotion, passion, instinct, heart, beauty, and love. It is the unformed, fiery, and instinctual nature of feeling, the realm of ecstatic devotion, representing the path of Bhakti Yoga in the West. This raw emotional force is given shape, definition, and articulation by the eighth Sephira, Hod, or splendor. Attributed to the planet Mercury, Hod is the sphere of the concrete intellect, of science, writing, commerce, reason, and communication. It is the form aspect which balances Netzach's force. It is the realm of philosophy and logic, the very sphere of magical knowledge, and the Qabbalah itself, representing the path of Jnana Yoga. These two spheres, the heart and the mind, pour their combined energies downward into the ninth Sephira, Yesod, the foundation. Attributed to the moon, Yesod is the critical, invisible framework of the material world. It is the sphere of the astral light, the etheric double, the subtle electromagnetic matrix which acts as the invisible mold and energetic pattern upon which our entire physical world is constructed. It is the realm of generation and fertility, the deep tidal currents of the collective unconscious, which preserves the memory of nature and governs the rhythms of life. It is the sphere of the lunar triad, Artemis, the pure virgin, Aphrodite, the fertile mother, and Hecate, the wise and terrifying crone. Finally, all the energies of the entire tree, flowing down the pillars from the divine source, come to their ultimate and final manifestation in the 10th and last Sephira, Malkuth, the kingdom. This is the sphere of the element Earth, our physical plane, the visible universe. Yet, the Kabbalists insist that Malkuth is not a fallen, dead, or profane world, as unilluminated philosophies would have it. She is the inferior mother, the bride of the divine name. Malkuth, the kingdom, is the living, breathing, and glorious body of God, and we are blinded to its infinite sanctity only by the fog of our unawakened senses. The goal of the great work is not to escape Malkuth, but to realize its inherent holiness, to see the world as the mystic Traherne did, the corn as orient and immortal wheat, and all human beings as glittering and sparkling angels. Having thus clearly and eloquently delineated the grand cosmology of the art, the map of the soul's territory, Mr. Regardie turns his focus to the primary internal discipline required to consciously traverse these realms, the art and science of meditation. He begins with a necessary and bracing corrective, forcefully dismissing the aimless, passive, and uncontrolled fantasy or wool gathering that so commonly passes for meditation in the profane world. He insists, as all true masters have, that genuine meditation is a rigorous scientific discipline, an arduous labor requiring unwavering patience, persistence, and methodical training. The human mind, by its very nature, is a restless quicksilver engine designed to wander. It cannot be subdued by wishes, only by a systematic schedule of work. As testament to this, he cites the experience of the great Kabbalist Paul Foster Case, who practiced concentration exercises faithfully for 10 long months before the first tangible results began to appear. This perseverance is the price of mastery. Mr. Regardie then presents a thoroughly practical and demystified approach, brilliantly adapted to the Western constitution. He sets aside the complex and often painful yogic postures, which, while natural for a Hindu body, frequently present an insurmountable and wholly distracting physical barrier for the chair-accustomed Westerner. He returns to the essential dictum of Patanjali, that posture which is easy and comfortable is the correct one. For the Western student, this is most readily achieved by sitting upright in a firm, straight-backed chair, the spine held erect without strain, and the feet placed squarely upon the floor. From this stable position, the true work commences. The first step, Mr. Regardie teaches, is not to attack the mind, but to understand it. He prescribes the practice of introspection, a technique identical in principle to the psychoanalytic method of free association. The student is counseled simply to sit and watch the mind, giving it full rein to wander where it will, but observing its mechanisms with the detached curiosity of a scientist. In this way, one discovers for oneself the determined, associative chains of thought that govern the psyche. He even suggests the modern utility of a tape recorder, advising the student to quietly verbalize every single stray thought, memory, fantasy, and sensation that arises, and then to play back the recording. This practice, he states, develops a profound and indispensable psychological honesty, forcing the student to confront the true hidden content of consciousness, draining the repressive pressure of the superego and bringing the dark corners of the mind into the light of awareness. Having observed the mind's chaotic nature, the next stage is to provide it with a singular point of focus. Once again, Mr. Regardie dismisses the tactic of attacking the mind with the brute force of a straining will, an action which only creates profound resistance, fatigue, and failure. Instead, he advocates the skillful use of a mantra. This is a sacred word or phrase, repeated continuously, either audibly or mentally. With profound pragmatism, he demonstrates that the specific content of the mantra is secondary to the emotion and persistence with which it is employed. Whether one chooses a classical Eastern mantra like Om Mani Padme Hum, a powerful Christian prayer such as Kyrie eleison, or the Prayer of Jesus, a Qabalistic divine name, or even a simple nursery rhyme, the mechanism is the same. The rhythmic, continuous repetition mechanically occupies the mind, slowing its incessant turbulence. When this repetition is charged with profound emotion, be it religious devotion or, as he pragmatically suggests for the agnostic, the fervent memory of one's first love, it forces the mind into a state of one-pointedness, eventually becoming an automatic internal vibration. This mechanical practice leads directly to a far more profound and powerful technique, the regulated breath. The student is instructed to establish a simple, steady rhythm, such as counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 on the inhalation, and the same on the exhalation. This simple, sustained rhythm achieves two critical goals. First, it directly calms the mind, as the rate of mental turbulence is physiologically linked to the rate of respiration. Second, and far more importantly, the rhythmic breathing initiates distinct and powerful physical sensations. First, a subtle tingling throughout the body as the vital energy, or prana, begins to circulate freely, and then peculiar and deeply pleasant rippling sensation originating in the diaphragm which spreads outward, until the entire body is perceived as a single, unified, vital pulsation. This, Mr. Regardie reveals, is the master key. The mind, which resists forced stillness, becomes utterly and irresistibly fascinated by these profound and pleasurable internal sensations. Thus, concentration is no longer forced. It arises spontaneously, joyfully, and inevitably, drawn to this inner experience in the same way as the ancient texts state that a bird is charmed by the gaze of a snake. This achievement unlocks one of the deepest laws of practical mysticism, the effect of prolonged concentration. Mr. Regardie explains that when the mind's attention is fixed, steadfastly and without wavering, upon any single sensation or part of the body, a twofold process occurs. First, the sensation is enormously heightened, becoming vivid and electric, but then, as concentration persists, the sensation begins to fade, a sense of numbness appears, and finally, the object of concentration is entirely expunged from consciousness. The awareness of that limb or feeling simply vanishes. This paradoxical law, he reveals, is the very mechanism for achieving the supreme goal of all meditation. The ego, the I consciousness, is the very dragon in the way, which mysticism calls the slayer of the real. For it is this isolated sense of self that creates the fundamental heresy of separateness and blinds us to the divine unity of all life. By applying this same law and turning the full, concentrated power of the mind back upon the sense of the ego itself, the practitioner initiates the final alchemical process. At first, the ego awareness is heightened, perhaps into a state of egomania. But as the meditative concentration is maintained, the ego sense itself begins to subside, its outlines blur, and at last it fades from view entirely. It is displaced, leaving behind not a dark void or unconscious sleep, but a state of profoundly active, empty, and vigilant awareness, a mind consciously stilled, acutely and blissfully aware of its essential identity with the root and source of all life. This is the realization of that thou art. To aid this process, Regardie boldly incorporates the psychophysiological work of Wilhelm Reich, explaining the phenomenon of hyperventilation. The deep, rhythmic breathing of the practice deliberately alters the blood chemistry, increasing its alkalinity. This, in turn, induces powerful somatic responses, tingling, dizziness, pulsations of energy, and even the automatic rigidity or tetany known to yoga. These sensations are not to be feared as pathologies. They are signs of progress, tools which further fascinate the mind. This process can also engineer a powerful affective discharge, a spontaneous eruption of tears or laughter, which clears the psychic armor and releases repressed emotional blockages, leaving the mind clearer and concentration enormously enhanced. The mantra or prayer, when used at this crucial moment of altered consciousness, then acts precisely as a Zen koan, a direct statement of reality which precipitates the final, shattering breakthrough into enlightenment. The magnificent synthesis of this entire system, uniting the divine philosophy of theurgy, the cosmic map of the Qabbalah, and the internal engine of meditation, is delivered in Mr. Regardie's supreme practical treatise, The Art of True Healing. This essay presents the crowning jewel of his practical work, the famous technique known as the middle pillar exercise. He begins by defining the subject of the work, the universal healing force, the single spiritual energy that directs and controls all life, which Freud called libido, and the yogis call prana. All human affliction, whether physical disease, mental suffering, or material poverty, is ultimately, he states, a symptom of nervous depletion caused by a conscious or unconscious resistance to the free inward flow of this divine spiritual current. The solution, therefore, lies in systematically removing these blockages and consciously opening the self to this infinite spiritual reservoir. The middle pillar technique is the precise scientific method for accomplishing this. It is the practical application of the Qabalistic primer, the conscious awakening of the inner spiritual centers which correspond directly to the Sephiroth of the middle pillar of the tree of life. The practitioner, either sitting upright or lying relaxed, is instructed to first build the central column of light within his own body. He begins by visualizing the coronal sphere, a ball of brilliant, dazzling white light stationed just above the crown of his head, corresponding to Kether. While holding this image, he vibrates the divine name, Ihya, feeling the center awaken like a new star, sending a tingling sensation even to the fingertips and toes. He then visualizes a shaft of this light descending from the crown to the throat, where it forms the air center, a second sphere of light corresponding to the invisible Sephira Death, the sphere of knowledge. Here he vibrates Jehovah Elohim. The shaft continues its descent to the solar plexus, just over the heart, where it forms the blazing golden fire center, corresponding to the central Sephira Tifereth. Here he vibrates Jehovah Eloah Vedas. Mr. Regardie helpfully adds that the Gnostic name I'au may be substituted here, being equally valid and easier to vibrate. The light descends again to the pelvic and generative region, forming the water center, corresponding to Yesod, which he vibrates with the name Shaddai El Chai. Crucially, he clarifies that this practice does not, as many fear, awaken base sexual impulses. Rather, its effect is sedative, sublimating this potent energy and circulating it through the entire system instead of allowing it to stagnate. Finally, the shaft descends to the soles of the feet, forming the earth center corresponding to Malkuth, which he awakens with the vibration of Adonai Haaretz. The practitioner has now formulated the complete middle pillar, a shaft of 5 brilliant diamonds of light pulsating within his own core, and has made available an enormous quantity of divine power. This power cannot be allowed to remain static, or it will cause tension. It must be circulated. Mr. Regardie details 3 primary methods for this vital circulation, which together form the ovoid sphere, or aura. The first circulation moves the energy side to side, visualizing the force rising up the right side of the body, the pillar of mercy, and descending the left, the pillar of severity, uniting the pairs of opposites. The second circulation moves the energy front to back, visualizing it descending the front of the body and ascending the spine. The third and culminating technique is the fountain. The practitioner draws the accumulated energy in a great rush up the central middle pillar from the feet to the crown, where it erupts like a glorious fountain, cascading down the outer confines of the body on all sides until it gathers again at the feet, thus forming and polishing the complete ovoid sphere of swiftly circulating light. This establishes the true magical self, the kernel within a nut, a radiant, charged, and perfected sphere of sensation. This, Regardie states, is the foundational state for all true healing. From this empowered state, the operator can direct the flow of this healing energy by the power of his attention, focusing it like a beam of light onto any diseased organ or afflicted limb, dissolving the blockage and restoring healthy function. This same power, he explains, can be used for all non-therapeutic purposes. This is the heart of practical magic. If the student desires a specific material or spiritual commodity, such as books or knowledge, attributed to Mercury, he performs the middle pillar exercise and then visualizes his entire aura in the passive, receptive, negative color of that force, in this case orange. By vibrating the corresponding divine name, Elohim Savush, he transforms his aura into a powerful spiritual magnet, a vacuum which draws those specific mercurial forces, the needed books, the right teachers, the critical information, to him, not through supernatural violation of law, but through normal but unsuspected channels. Conversely, if he wishes to help another, he visualizes the active, positive color, yellow for Mercury, and consciously projects this healing, inspiring energy to his subject telepathically, combining the willed communication of vital power with focused suggestion. Finally, this grand collection concludes with a technical manual for mastering the secret, generative language of the entire Qabalistic system, the Qabalah of number and meaning. This essay illuminates the exegetical methods which permit the initiate to unlock the profound, interwoven mysteries concealed within the sacred texts, names, and letters themselves. He focuses first on gematria, the core science of correlating Hebrew words by their numerical value, as Hebrew letters are also numbers. He provides the classic and most essential example. The word achad, meaning one or unity, has the numerical value of 13. The word ahava, meaning love, also has the value of 13. From this mathematical identity, the Kabbalist deduces a supreme spiritual truth. The very nature of unity is love, and love is the agent of unity. Furthermore, when these two principles are joined, 13 plus 13 equals 26, which is the numerical value of the unutterable four-lettered name of God, the Tetragrammaton, EHAVH. Thus, the very name of the Godhead is revealed to be the sacred formula of unity expressed through love. He likewise explored notarikon, the method of creating potent magical acronyms from the initial letters of a sentence. The word agla, vibrated in the banishing rituals, is thus revealed as the initials of the Hebrew phrase, Ato Jibor Lolam Adonai, Thou art mighty forever, O Lord. The powerful seven-lettered name Ararita, used in the supreme hexagram rituals, is similarly a notarikon for the phrase, one is his beginning, one is his individuality, his permutation is one. This entire body of divine wisdom, philosophy, and practice is then brought to a stunning and triumphant climax in Mr. Regardie's supreme exegetical analysis of the four letters inscribed upon the cross, I-N-R-I. Here, he demonstrates how this one formula contains the central secret of the Western esoteric tradition and unites every essay in his book. He traces the evolution of this key word, known to the profane world as the Latin sentence, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. It was adopted by the medieval alchemists to mean igna natura renovatur integra. All of nature is renewed by fire. The initiates of the Golden Dawn, however, applied their Kabbalistic keys to unlock its deepest mystery. They first converted the letters into their Hebrew equivalents, Yod, Nun, Resh, Yod. Applying the Yetziratic attributions from the Qabbalah, these three distinct letters correspond to the astrological signs Virgo, Scorpio, and the Sun. These signs, in turn, are the symbolic keys to the great Egyptian mythos. Virgo corresponds to Isis, the great virgin Mother Nature. Scorpio corresponds to Apophis, the serpent of darkness, the destroyer, the principle of death and corruption, and the Sun corresponds to Osiris, the slain, dismembered, and ultimately resurrected God. Thus, the inscription on the cross reveals the supreme Gnostic and theurgic formula of all creation synthesized in the keyword Hi-A-O. This is the timeless mystery of spiritual evolution, that all life and nature, Isis, must inevitably pass through the gate of death and transformation, Apophis, in order to achieve a glorious resurrection into a higher, perfected life, Osiris. This is the formula of the dying rose, the harvest, the winter, and the eternal return of spring. It is the core process of all initiation. The initiates of the order, he reveals, reenact this formula through a series of physical gestures which form the letters L, V, and X, the sign of the mourning of Isis, the sign of Apophis and Typhon, and the sign of Osiris, slain and risen. These three gestures form the cross of light, and light, in Latin, is leave X. Applying gematria one final time, Mr. Regardie unveils the final equation. The Roman numerals L, V, and X total 65. By turning to the Qabalah of number, we find that the supreme Hebrew name for the holy guardian angel, the higher self, the very goal of the great work, is Adonai, my Lord. This name, composed of Aleph, Daleth, Nun, and Yod, also has the numerical value of precisely 65. In this final, staggering revelation, the entire system is locked into perfection. Leave X equals Adonai. Light is the Lord. The purpose of all magic, the meaning of the Qabalah, the goal of the middle pillar, and the secret of the bornless ritual are one and the same. The conscious invocation of the divine light, which is, and has always been, identical to one's own higher and immortal self. Israel Regardie's Foundations of Practical Magic thus stands as a timeless and luminous bequest, a complete, coherent, and profoundly courageous work that has restored the integrity of the Western way, providing for all future generations the scientific keys and the practical methods by which the human soul may achieve its magnificent and intended destiny. Thank you for delving into Foundations of Practical Magic with occult mysticism. Share your experiences below and join our community. Like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more magical wisdom. Until next time, keep practicing the arcane